The flames crackled against the evening sky as Jacques de Molay stood chained to the stake, his voice rising above the roar of the fire. With his final breath, the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar didn't plead for mercy. He cursed the King of France and the Pope who had condemned him, vowing they would join him in death within a year. And chillingly, his prophecy came true. This moment, steeped in defiance and mystery, marks the dramatic end of an order that had once been the most powerful military and financial force in medieval Europe. But it also marks the beginning of a puzzle that has captivated historians, treasure hunters, and conspiracy theorists for centuries. What really happened to the Knights Templar? Why were they destroyed so abruptly after 200 years of influence? And what secrets did they take with them to the grave? The Templars' downfall was swift and brutal. In a single-day Friday, the 13th of October, 1307, King Philip IV of France ordered the arrest of every Templar in his kingdom, accusing them of heresy, blasphemy, and corruption. Within years, the order was disbanded, its leaders executed or imprisoned, and its vast wealth seemingly vanished. But the more we dig into this story, the more questions arise. Were the Templars truly guilty of the horrific crimes they were accused of, or were they victims of a ruthless king desperate to seize their riches? Did they really guard lost holy relics as legends claim? And perhaps most tantalizing of all, did some of them escape, taking their secrets and treasure with them? Today, we're diving deep into 25 of the most perplexing mysteries surrounding the fall of the Knights Templar. From whispers of buried gold to rumored connections with the Holy Grail, from their shadowy rituals to the possibility that they secretly survived in exile, this is a story of power, faith, and betrayal unlike any other in history. Some of these enigmas may never be fully solved, but each one pulls us deeper into the intrigue of an order that continues to haunt our imagination. So join us as we unravel the truth behind one of the medieval world's most enduring legends, and see if, after 700 years, we can finally separate fact from fiction. The dawn raids of Friday the 13th, 1307, were a masterpiece of medieval espionage, a strike so sudden and perfectly executed that the Templars never saw it coming. Before sunrise, royal agents fanned out across France, battering down the doors of Templar commanderies as night still lay sleeping. Every arrest warrant bore King Philip IV's seal, accusing the order of secret ceremonies, spitting on the cross, and worshipping a mysterious idol known as Baphomet. But what's truly staggering is the scale of the operation. Hundreds of arrests, all synchronized to the same hour, in an era when a message could take weeks to travel across the kingdom. How did Philip keep his scheme airtight? Some historians believe the king relied on Templar insiders, men who betrayed their brothers for gold or freedom. Others argue it was pure military precision, with sealed orders opened only at the last moment. Yet the most chilling detail is what didn't happen next. Across Europe, kings and bishops who had relied on Templar loans and protection did nothing. Not England, not Portugal, not even the Holy Roman Empire lifted a finger as France dismantled the order. Were they complicit or simply terrified of Philip's reach? And then there's the Church. Pope Clement V, initially outraged, quickly folded under Philip's pressure, issuing a bull that condemned the Templars without a fair trial. Was this collusion, or did the Pope genuinely believe the lurid confessions extracted through torture? The speed of their downfall suggests something darker than heresy, a calculated erasure of the only force that could rival royal power. But if the Templars were truly guilty, why did so many retract their confessions when the torture stopped? And why, in their final moments, did so many die proclaiming their innocence? This silence, this eerie coordination, hints at a deeper conspiracy, one that leads us to the next mystery, the whispered role of the Vatican's own archives, where untold Templar secrets may still lie buried. Pope Clement V remains one of history's most enigmatic figures, a man caught between his duty to the Church and the ruthless ambitions of a king. When the Templar arrests began, his first reaction was fury. He immediately suspended the French inquisitors involved, demanding the arrested knights be handed over to church authority. But within months, that defiance crumbled. Under intense pressure from Philip IV, Clement issued a series of papal bulls that first defended the Templars, then hesitated, and finally condemned them. So what changed? Was the Pope a willing participant in the Templars' destruction, or a hostage to political forces beyond his control? The truth may lie in the months leading up to the arrests, months filled with hushed meetings and unsigned letters. Philip had already proven he wasn't above manipulating the Church. Years earlier, he'd engineered the kidnapping of Clement's predecessor, Pope Boniface VIII, who died shortly after in suspicious circumstances. Now, with Clement's papacy based in Avignon, a city effectively under French control, the king held all the leverage. Some accounts describe secret bargains, Templar wealth for papal survival. Others suggest Clement believed the shocking confessions, extracted under torture, revealed a genuine heresy festering within the order, but the most damning evidence comes from the papal bulls themselves. Early documents stressed the Templars' right to defend themselves. Later ones, like Vox in Excelso, dissolved the order without ever declaring it guilty, a legal sleight of hand that satisfied Philip while preserving the Church's technical innocence. Then there's Pastorales Praemonentii, which ordered all European monarchs to arrest Templars, but only after Philip had already done so. The timing reeks of staged cooperation. The lingering question isn't just about Clement's motives, it's about what the Templars knew. Were they condemned for heresy or for something more dangerous? Their banking network held the debts of kings. Their vaults allegedly contained relics that could shake Christendom, and their influence stretched from Jerusalem to London. If the Templars had secrets powerful enough to make both Pope and King tremble, their sudden eradication starts to make a different kind of sense. The accusations hurled at the Templars read like something from a medieval horror story, claims so outlandish they defy belief, yet repeated with such conviction they've echoed through history. At their trial, knights were forced to confess to spitting on the cross, denying Christ, and engaging in illicit kisses during secret initiation rites. Most haunting of all was the charge of worshipping a mysterious idol, a bearded head known as Baphomet, said to grant the order power and riches. But how much of this was truth, and how much was the twisted invention of a king desperate to justify their destruction? The confessions themselves are deeply unreliable, extracted under brutal torture. Templars were stretched on the rack, their feet held to flames until flesh melted. One knight described being suspended by his wrists until blood pooled in his hands. Under such agony, men would admit to anything, even the impossible. Some later recanted, like the Templar Jean de Chalons, who tearfully told the court, "I would have confessed to killing God himself if they demanded it." Yet others, even without torture, described rituals that hint at something beyond mere fabrication. Could there have been a shadow tradition within the order, a layer of symbolism misunderstood or deliberately twisted by their accusers? The Baphomet mystery is particularly telling. No physical evidence of such an idol was ever found, yet the name appears in multiple confessions. Some scholars argue it was a corruption of Mahomet, medieval slang for the Islamic prophet Muhammad, suggesting the Templars were accused of secret Islamic sympathies. Others point to the order's alleged discovery of ancient Gnostic texts under Jerusalem's Temple Mount, proposing Baphomet as a coded reference to esoteric knowledge. And then there's the theory that it was all a grotesque misunderstanding, that the idol was actually a reliquary containing the skull of John the Baptist or another sacred relic, venerated in private ceremonies. What makes these charges so perplexing is the stark contrast with the Templars' public face. For 2 centuries, they were Christendom's model warriors, the first to charge into battle, the last to retreat, their banners bearing the cross as they died defending pilgrims. Their rule required daily prayers, strict celibacy, and surrender of all personal wealth. Would men so devoted truly gather in secret to spit on the very symbol they bled for? Or were these stories crafted to paint heresy over financial greed? The answer may lie in the space between myth and ritual. Every medieval order had initiation rites, symbolic acts to test loyalty and cement brotherhood. A recruit might be ordered to pretend to renounce his faith, only to be embraced moments later as a lesson in humility. Such theater, taken out of context, could easily be weaponized. And that's the heart of the mystery, not whether the Templars were heretics, but whether their secrets, whatever they truly were twisted into something monstrous to serve a king's hunger for gold. This ambiguity lingers like smoke from de Molay's pyre, because if even a fraction of these rituals were real, they suggest a hidden dimension to the Templars, one that leads us to the next question: what else might have been happening behind the closed doors of their preceptories? No medieval mystery sparks the imagination quite like the lost treasure of the Knights Templar. At the height of their power, this order wasn't just a military force. They were the bankers of kings, the holders of mortgages for half of Europe's nobility, and the guardians of unimaginable wealth. Yet when Philip IV's men stormed their preceptories, they found vaults suspiciously empty. So where did it all go? The rumors are as tantalizing as they are varied. Some say the Templars smuggled their treasure out of France under cover of night, loading it onto their fleet of ships anchored at La Rochelle. Witnesses reported 18 vessels vanishing without a trace shortly before the arrests, an entire naval convoy disappearing into legend. Could they have carried gold, relics, or even sacred objects like the Ark of the Covenant to safety? The Scottish theory suggests Templar survivors fled to Robert the Bruce's court, where they allegedly fought at Bannockburn under cryptic banners. Others point to Portugal, where King Denis sheltered the order under a new name, the Order of Christ. Then there's the darker possibility that the treasure was never meant to be found. Underground tunnels beneath Templar strongholds like Geyser's Castle have fueled speculation for centuries. Did they bury their wealth in intricate chambers, protecting it with traps and coded maps? The sudden silence around their financial operations hints at meticulous planning. Records show Templar officials burning account books days before the arrests. Why erase the paper trail unless you intended to return? But the biggest question isn't where the treasure went, it's what it truly contained. Beyond gold and jewels, whispers persist of sacred relics, fragments of the true cross, the crown of thorns, or even the Holy Grail itself. Some accounts describe strange artifacts spirited away from Jerusalem, objects that held not just monetary value but power. Could this explain the ruthless speed of their suppression? Kings fear rebellions, but they tremble before secrets that might undermine their divine right to rule. What makes the treasure hunt so compelling is the lingering evidence of something extraordinary. In the centuries since, sudden fortunes have appeared in unlikely places. The Sinclair family of Scotland built Rosslyn Chapel, a structure crammed with Templar symbolism, almost overnight. The Portuguese Order of Christ bankrolled the Age of Discovery, their sails emblazoned with the Templar cross as if carrying forward an unbroken legacy. Even the Vatican's own archives hold inventories listing Templar possessions that were never accounted for. Perhaps the real treasure wasn't gold, but knowledge, documents proving royal bloodlines, heretical gospels, or blueprints to technologies ahead of their time. Whatever it was, someone went to great lengths to erase it from history, and that brings us to the next enigma, the curious survival of Templar traditions in places no one expected. Among the most puzzling gaps in the Templar story is the eerie disappearance of their archives, vast collections of documents that could have revealed the truth behind their rituals, finances, and political dealings. These weren't just random papers, they were meticulous records kept by an order that functioned as Europe's first multinational corporation. Yet when royal officials stormed Templar strongholds, they found chests emptied, ledgers burned, and not a single complete archive intact. The question isn't just where these documents went, but why someone went to such lengths to erase them. Some accounts suggest the Templars themselves destroyed sensitive material in the days before the arrests. In Paris, witnesses reported smoke rising from their preceptory for hours, as if someone were methodically burning evidence. Other records hint at a more deliberate concealment, hidden compartments beneath chapels, false walls in commanderies, even rumors of documents sealed inside lead tubes and buried underground. But the most persistent theory involves the Vatican. After the order's dissolution, papal agents supposedly seized crates of Templar files, locking them away in the secret archives where they remain inaccessible. If true, what could be so explosive that the Church would keep it hidden for 7 centuries? Modern treasure hunters have turned their attention to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, the very site where the Templars first excavated beneath the ruins of Solomon's Temple. Some researchers claim the order rediscovered ancient tunnels there, repositories perfect for concealing scrolls or relics. Satellite imaging has revealed anomalies beneath the surface, sparking theories of a hidden archive waiting to be unearthed. But with the site now under strict religious control, definitive answers remain out of reach. The absence of these records speaks to a deeper pattern of historical censorship. When powers collide, truth is often the first casualty. The Templars' missing archives might have exposed inconvenient alliances, financial debts of kings, or even alternative Christian traditions suppressed by Rome. Their disappearance ensures we may never know the full scope of the order's influence or the real reasons for their fall. This deliberate erasure raises another tantalizing possibility, that some Templars saw the storm coming and fled with more than just treasure. Scattered across Europe are accounts of knights vanishing into the night, their fates intertwined with whispers of secret networks and new identities. From the misty highlands of Scotland to the coastal strongholds of Portugal, these survivors may have carried forward something far more valuable than gold, the unbroken lineage of their order's most guarded knowledge. On the fog-shrouded coast of La Rochelle, one of the most baffling disappearances in medieval history unfolded. The Templars weren't just knights, they were master mariners controlling one of Europe's largest private fleets. Yet when royal forces closed in, 18 of their ships slipped anchor and vanished into the Atlantic mist. No wreckage, no sightings, no trace. It was as if the ocean itself swallowed them whole. But ships don't simply disappear, so where did they go and what were they carrying? The theories are as vast as the sea they sailed. Some historians believe the fleet transported the order's fabled treasure chests of gold, sacred relics, or even their legendary secret archives. Others argue these vessels carried something far more precious, surviving Templars fleeing persecution. Maritime records from the time note an uncanny detail. The ships were provisioned for long voyages, their holds stocked with supplies for months at sea. This wasn't a panicked escape, it was a meticulously planned exodus, and the timing was impeccable. The fleet vanished mere days before the mass arrests, suggesting someone inside the order had advance warning of the king's betrayal. The trail grows warmer when we follow the currents. In Scotland, whispers persist of mysterious knights arriving by ship just as the order collapsed. These men reportedly fought alongside Robert the Bruce at Bannockburn in 1314, their tactics mirroring Templar precision. Could the white-mantled warriors depicted in Scottish chronicles have been fugitive Templars regrouping under a new banner? The evidence is circumstantial but compelling, unexplained fortifications built with Templar architectural touches, sudden infusions of wealth into noble houses like the Sinclairs, even the Rosslyn Chapel's carvings, which seem to tell a hidden story of survival. Then there's Portugal, where King Denis openly sheltered the order under a new name, the Order of Christ, their insignia, a modified Templar cross, their mission. To fund the age of exploration, Vasco da Gama and Prince Henry the Navigator sailed under sails emblazoned with that very symbol, as if the Templar legacy had found a new home in uncharted waters. The Portuguese connection raises a tantalizing possibility that the vanished fleet didn't just flee, but relocated an entire network of knowledge and power to safer shores. But the most intriguing clue lies in the Templars' nautical expertise. They weren't just passengers on these ships, they were pioneers of medieval navigation, rumored to possess charts far more advanced than their time. Some accounts speak of a star map guiding them to lands beyond Christendom. Could they have reached the Americas centuries before Columbus, as fringe theories suggest? The Newport Tower in Rhode Island, with its uncanny resemblance to Templar round churches, fuels such speculation. While mainstream scholars dismiss these claims, the pattern is undeniable wherever the fleet might have sailed. Their influence resurfaces in the most unexpected places. This maritime mystery does more than hint at escape, it suggests reinvention. If the Templars preserved their order across oceans, what else might they have preserved? Their rituals, their relics, or something far more dangerous to the powers that sought to erase them? The answer may lie not in sunken ships, but in the bloodlines and brotherhoods that quietly carried their legacy forward. And that leads us to the next enigma, the shadowy descendants who claim Templar lineage to this day. The legend of the Holy Grail and the Knights Templar is a tapestry woven from equal parts history, myth, and tantalizing possibility. For centuries, whispers have persisted that the order didn't just serve the church, they protected its most sacred relic. But was the Grail a golden chalice, a stone, or something far more elusive? The connection first emerges in medieval romances where Templar-like knights guard the Grail in shadowed castles. Yet the most intriguing clues lie not in fiction but in the Templars' own actions. Their very first headquarters sat atop Jerusalem's Temple Mount, where they conducted extensive excavations beneath what was once Solomon's Temple. What might they have found in those ancient tunnels? Some scholars argue the Grail was never a physical object, but a metaphor for hidden knowledge, perhaps Gnostic gospels or heretical teachings suppressed by the Church. The Templars' sudden rise from humble knights to Europe's most powerful order lends weight to this theory. How else could they have amassed such influence unless they possessed something extraordinary? Their alleged discoveries under the Temple Mount might have included ancient texts or artifacts that challenged orthodox Christian doctrine. This wouldn't just explain their wealth, it would explain why both king and pope moved so ruthlessly to silence them. After all, gold can be seized, but ideas are far harder to erase. Then there's the more tantalizing possibility that the Grail was real and the Templars knew its location. In the medieval mind, the Grail wasn't just a cup, it was divine power made manifest. Some accounts describe it as a stone that fell from heaven, others as a vessel containing Christ's bloodline. The Templars' close ties to the Holy Land, their unusual veneration of head relics, and their cryptic rituals all fuel speculation. Did they unearth evidence of a bloodline that could shake the foundations of European monarchy? The timing is suspicious. The Grail legends exploded in popularity just as the Templars fell, as if their suppression unleashed the very secrets they'd guarded. What makes this mystery endure isn't just the question of the Grail's nature, it's the legacy the Templars left behind. From the labyrinthine symbolism of Rosslyn Chapel to the sudden appearance of Grail motifs in European art after their dissolution, the trail feels deliberate. Perhaps the Grail was never meant to be found, only sought. Or perhaps in the end, the real Grail was the Templars themselves, a brotherhood who carried a flame of knowledge through the Dark Ages only to be consumed by it. This duality between literal treasure and hidden truth may hold the key to their downfall. If the Templars guarded something powerful enough to redefine faith or topple kings, their eradication wasn't just greed, it was necessity. And that realization leads us to the next chilling possibility, that their greatest secret wasn't lost but passed quietly into the hands of those who still walk among us. The flames had barely cooled when the rumors began, a dying man's last words echoing with supernatural precision. Jacques de Molay, the Grand Master who had endured 7 years of imprisonment and torture, stood chained to a pyre on an island in the Seine. As the fire licked at his robes, he did not beg for mercy. Instead, he summoned all his strength and delivered a prophecy that would ripple through history. Pope Clement V and King Philip IV would face divine judgment within a year. And then, as if fate itself were listening, the impossible happened. Clement succumbed to a sudden illness just 33 days later. Philip followed within 8 months, his death shrouded in whispers of seizures and delirium. Coincidence or something far more unsettling, the curse's timing was too precise to ignore. Medieval Europe saw divine intervention everywhere. Storms, plagues, even the birth of 2-headed calves were interpreted as signs from heaven. But this was different. 2 of the most powerful men in Christendom, both architects of the Templars' destruction, dead before the ashes of their victims had scattered. Even contemporary chroniclers, usually skeptical of such claims, recorded the events with hushed awe. The papal registers note Clement's final days as filled with inexplicable dread, while Philip's courtiers described him screaming about de Molay's ghost haunting his chambers. Whether by divine wrath or the psychological weight of guilt, the curse had become reality. Yet history loves to blur the line between fact and legend. Some scholars argue the entire narrative was embellished after the fact, a moral fable crafted by Templar sympathizers to tarnish their persecutors' legacies. The timeline itself is slippery. While Clement did die shortly after de Molay, Philip's passing came closer to 11 months later, not the tidy year of folklore. And the king was already in declining health, his reign marked by financial ruin and military failures. But the deeper question isn't whether the curse was supernatural, it's why this story, above all others, became the Templars' defining epilogue. Perhaps because it transformed their defeat into something transcendent. A broken order couldn't topple a king, but a martyr's last words could outlive an empire. The curse became a symbol of resistance, proof that even the mightiest could be held accountable. In later centuries, revolutionaries would invoke de Molay's name as they overturned monarchies, while secret societies wove his defiance into their rituals. The irony is palpable. The Templars, loyal servants of church and crown, rebranded as avengers against tyranny. What lingers isn't just the mystery of the curse's power, but the shadow it casts over those who survive. If de Molay's words could reach beyond the grave, what else might the Templars have set in motion? Their traditions, their knowledge, even their bloodlines didn't vanish. They seeped into the cracks of history, waiting to resurface. And that leads us to the next enigma, the whispered networks of families and fraternities who claim to safeguard the Templar legacy, passing it down like a torch through the centuries. Even as the last Templar strongholds fell, whispers spread of an order that refused to die. While King Philip and Pope Clement declared victory, rumors swirled of hidden networks, secret oaths, and knights who simply vanished into the night. But how much of this is romantic legend, and how much points to a genuine survival? The theory that the Templars evolved into the Freemasons is one of history's most persistent and hotly debated mysteries. On the surface, the connections seem compelling. Freemasonry emerged centuries later with rituals echoing Templar symbolism, coded handshakes, initiatic trials, and a reverence for Solomon's temple. Some Masonic lodges even claim direct descent, displaying banners embroidered with the distinctive red cross, but historians caution against drawing too straight a line. The first verified Masonic lodges appeared in the late 1600s, nearly 400 years after the Templars' dissolution. could an organization truly lie dormant for so long? The evidence grows murkier when we examine what happened to former Templars after the Purge. Many were absorbed into rival orders like the Knights Hospitaller, their skills too valuable to discard. In Portugal, the monarchy simply rebranded them as the Order of Christ, with Henry the Navigator later using their resources to fund voyages of discovery. Meanwhile, in Scotland, exiled knights allegedly found refuge with Robert the Bruce, blending into local clans. These documented transitions suggest not a grand conspiracy, but a pragmatic dispersal, survivors adapting rather than resurrecting. Yet one artifact fuels the survival theory like no other, the Charter of Laminius. This controversial document, supposedly written in 1324, purports to list a secret line of Grand Masters continuing after Jacques de Molay's death. Written in cipher and bearing cryptic signatures, it surfaced in the early 18th century among French Masonic circles. Skeptics dismiss it as an elaborate hoax, noting its late appearance and inconsistencies with Templar record-keeping. But believers point to its precise Latin phrasing and the fact that some names match obscure historical figures linked to the Order's shadowy afterlife. What's undeniable is how the Templars' image transformed in death. Once reviled as heretics, they were gradually reinvented as tragic heroes, wronged martyrs whose wisdom lived on in secret. Renaissance occultists wove them into esoteric traditions, while Enlightenment thinkers recast them as victims of tyranny. By the time Freemasonry rose to prominence, the Templars had become a blank canvas for every kind of myth. Whether they truly survived matters less than why we so desperately want them to have survived. Their story taps into something timeless, the dream of knowledge preserved against all odds, waiting to re-emerge when the world is ready. And so the question lingers, did the Templars vanish or simply learn to hide in plain sight? The answer may lie not in dusty manuscripts, but in the enduring power of their legend. A legacy so potent it convinces each new generation they're just one clue away from uncovering the truth. Among the most tantalizing relics linked to the Templars is one that still sparks fierce debate today, the Shroud of Turin. This ancient linen cloth, bearing the faint imprint of a man's tortured body, has been venerated for centuries as the burial shroud of Christ. But what few realize is that the shroud's historical trail goes mysteriously dark for over 100 years, a gap that coincides almost perfectly with the Templars' rise and fall. Could this sacred cloth have been part of their most closely guarded secrets? The connection begins with one of the strangest charges leveled against the Templars during their trials, the worship of a mysterious bearded head. Witnesses described rituals involving a spectral face, sometimes called Baphomet, which the knights allegedly revered. But what if this head wasn't an idol at all? Some researchers argue it was the shroud itself folded to show only the face, its haunting image misinterpreted by outsiders as a pagan relic. The theory gains traction when we examine the shroud's lost years. After surfacing in Constantinople in the 1200s, it vanishes from records until 1354, when it suddenly appears in a French church. That gap aligns eerily with the Templars' heyday and their suppression. Carbon dating adds another layer of intrigue. In 1988, tests suggested the shroud originated between 1260 and 1390, precisely the Templar era. Critics dismissed this as a medieval forgery, but later research revealed flaws in the testing process. The sample came from a repaired section, possibly contaminating results. Newer studies point to older fibers, reigniting questions about its true age. Even more compelling is the shroud's intricate herringbone weave, a fabric style documented in 1st century Judea, yet almost unknown in medieval Europe. How would forgers have replicated such an obscure detail? The Templars' potential custody of the shroud would explain both their sudden wealth and their brutal downfall. Imagine the power of holding Christ's burial cloth, an object capable of drawing pilgrims' wealth and divine legitimacy. but it would also make them a target. If Philip IV learned they possessed such a relic, it would give him motive beyond greed, control over a sacred symbol that could legitimize his reign or undermine the Church's authority. The Shroud's reappearance in France shortly after the Templars' dissolution feels less like coincidence and more like a confiscated treasure quietly returned to ecclesiastical hands. Yet the Shroud is just one piece of a larger puzzle. The Templars' rumored hoard included other enigmatic objects: the Crown of Thorns, fragments of the True Cross, even the Ark of the Covenant. Their fascination with sacred artifacts suggests a deeper mission, not just to protect pilgrims, but to safeguard the physical remnants of biblical history. And that raises an even more provocative question. If they held one relic of such profound significance, what else might they have concealed? The answer may lie not in dusty archives, but in the cryptic symbols they left behind, a trail of clues leading to their next great mystery. Of all the charges leveled against the Templars, none has sparked more fascination or confusion than their alleged worship of Baphomet. The name alone conjures images of dark rituals and forbidden knowledge, but what was this mysterious figure really? During the trials, knights under torture described a bearded head or statue they were forced to venerate, sometimes called Baphomet. Yet no physical evidence of such an idol was ever found, leaving historians to piece together truth from fragments of coerced confessions and medieval prejudice. One compelling theory suggests Baphomet was never an idol at all, but a linguistic misunderstanding. The name closely resembles Mahomet, a medieval European corruption of Muhammad, leading some scholars to propose the Templars were falsely accused of secretly revering the Islamic prophet. Given their years in the Holy Land and documented respect for Muslim scholars, this charge may have been twisted from cultural exchange into heresy. Other linguists trace the word to the Arabic Abu Fahamet, meaning father of understanding, possibly referring to an initiation rite involving wisdom rather than worship. But the mystery deepens when we consider the Templars' rumored discoveries beneath Jerusalem's Temple Mount. Gnostic texts circulating at the time spoke of a divine androgyne, a fusion of male and female, human and divine, that some connect to later depictions of Baphomet. Could the Templars have encountered esoteric traditions that blended Christian, Islamic, and pre-Christian symbolism? Their sudden wealth and architectural innovations hint at knowledge beyond mainstream medieval thought. Fueling speculation, they preserved ancient wisdom suppressed by the Church. Centuries after the Templars' fall, the Baphomet myth took on new life in the occult revival of the 19th century. French magician Eliphas Lévy reimagined the figure as the goat-headed symbol of balance we recognize today, part man, part beast, bearing torches of light and darkness. This version, later adopted by secret societies and misunderstood by popular culture, bears little resemblance to whatever the Templars might have known. Yet the transformation speaks volumes about how the Order's legacy became a canvas for every generation's fears and fascinations. The real enigma isn't whether Baphomet existed, but what it reveals about the Templars' relationship with secrecy. If their rituals, misinterpreted or not, involved layers of symbolic knowledge, what else might they have guarded? Their connections to Islamic scholars, their rumored discoveries in Jerusalem, and their sudden rise to power all suggest an order that thrived at the crossroads of faith and forbidden knowledge. Perhaps Baphomet was never an idol, but a key one that unlocked deeper mysteries the Templars took great pains to conceal. This lingering question of what they truly knew leads us to the next puzzle, the curious case of their missing fleet and whether it carried more than just gold into legend. In the shadowy corners of medieval France, two persecuted groups shared an eerie symmetry, the Knights Templar and the Cathars. Both were branded heretics, both faced brutal suppression, and both left behind fragments of belief that hint at deeper connections. The Cathars, known for their dualist views rejecting the material world, were massacred in the Albigensian Crusade decades before the Templars' fall. But whispers persist that the orders weren't just parallel victims. They may have been secret allies. Evidence of their entanglement is scattered but compelling. When the Cathar stronghold of Montségur fell in 1244, survivors spoke of 3 knights slipping away under cover of darkness, carrying a treasure of the spirit. Templar symbols carved into nearby caves suggest these fugitives might have found sanctuary within the order. Even more telling are the financial records Templar commanderies in the Languedoc region, where Catharism flourished, show unexplained expenditures labeled simply the work. Were they funneling resources to hidden refugees? The theological overlaps are equally provocative. The Cathars' rejection of church hierarchy and their emphasis on direct spiritual experience echoed certain Templar rituals described during their trials. Both groups were accused of secret initiations and alternative Christologies. When Templar witnesses spoke of a true Christ beyond the crucifix, it sounded strikingly close to Cathar beliefs that the material Christ never died on the cross. Was this coincidence or evidence of shared underground teachings? King Philip IV's motivations take on new dimensions when viewed through this lens. His grandfather had spearheaded the Cathar purge, and the family's vendetta against heresy ran deep. If the Templars were caught sheltering Cathar descendants or preserving their texts, it would explain the ferocity of Philip's crackdown, not just a financial grab, but a dynastic duty to erase all traces of religious descent. Yet the most tantalizing clue lies in geography. The Templars' last great maritime stronghold, La Rochelle, sat just north of Cathar territory. When their fleet vanished, could it have carried both orders' survivors to safety? The timing aligns with reports of white-robed monks appearing suddenly in Scotland and Switzerland, regions where dualist heresies later resurfaced. This silent exodus suggests a transfer of more than just people. It hints at the guarded passage of ideas. What emerges is a pattern far larger than 2 persecuted sects. The Templars and Cathars may represent strands of a broader medieval underground currents of belief that threatened the established order simply by existing. Their suppression wasn't just about doctrine, it was about control, and that realization shifts our focus to the next great enigma: how these religious conflicts intertwined with the political chess game that doomed the Templars. King Philip IV of France ruled a kingdom on the brink of financial ruin, a truth hidden behind his crown's glittering facade. Years of war with England, failed currency reforms, and lavish spending had drained the treasury dry. But the king's most pressing problem wasn't enemy armies or empty coffers. It was the mountain of debt he owed to none other than the Knights Templar. This wasn't just borrowing. The Templars functioned as Europe's first international bank, holding royal mortgages so vast that Philip had effectively pawned his own kingdom. When the time came to repay, the French king made a chilling calculation. It was cheaper to destroy his creditors than to pay them. The numbers tell a damning story. Records show Philip owed the Templars over 500,000 livres, an astronomical sum equivalent to years of royal revenue. For context, the entire annual income of the French crown barely reached 300,000 livres. The Templars didn't just hold Philip's debts, they financed his wars, managed his payroll, even stored the crown jewels in their Paris temple as collateral. This financial stranglehold gave the order unparalleled influence until Philip realized their ledgers could be erased as easily as their lives. What makes this debt so sinister is how blatantly it contradicts Philip's public justification for the Templars' destruction. In official decrees, he framed the arrests as a holy crusade against heresy, claiming divine duty forced him to act. Chroniclers of the time describe the king's theatrical piety, how he wept while signing arrest warrants, how his men wore hair shirts as they rounded up knights. This wasn't just hypocrisy, it was masterclass propaganda. By painting the Templars as Satan-worshipping traitors, Philip transformed a financial hit into a sacred mission. Even the Pope, initially skeptical, found it harder to defend accused heretics than to challenge a supposedly devout king. Yet the smoking gun lies in the aftermath. Instead of distributing confiscated Templar wealth to the church or poor as promised, Philip funneled it directly into royal coffers. The Paris Temple's treasury vanished into palace renovations and fresh military campaigns. Debts mysteriously disappeared from royal account books. Even the order's famed network of properties, thousands of farms, mills, and vineyards, were quietly absorbed by the crown under the guise of temporary management. This financial motive doesn't just explain Philip's actions, it exposes the brutal calculus of medieval power. The Templars made one fatal mistake. They believed their sacred mission and banking prowess made them untouchable. But no one is untouchable when standing between a bankrupt king and his survival. And that realization leads us to the next layer of deception: how Philip weaponized rumors and fake news to turn an entire continent against the men who once financed its kingdoms. The trial records of the Knights Templar read like pages torn from a medieval thriller, filled with contradictions, missing testimonies, and whispers of documents burned before anyone could read them. Hundreds of knights were interrogated across Europe, yet no two confessions matched perfectly. In Paris, men broke under torture, describing obscene rituals and secret oaths. In Cyprus, Templars laughed off the same charges, their testimonies untouched by coercion. But the most telling detail isn't what these parchments contain, it's what's conspicuously absent. Entire ledgers vanished, witnesses' names were scrubbed, and key confessions were lost before reaching the Pope's hands. Why go to such lengths to erase evidence unless the truth was more dangerous than the lies? Take the case of Hugues de Peraud, a high-ranking Templar who first confessed to spitting on the cross only to recant months later, claiming his admission was ripped from him on the rack. His revised testimony describes a chilling scene: royal agents smearing Templar symbols with animal blood to fabricate evidence, scribes altering records to match the king's narrative. Then there's the mysterious disappearance of the Chinon parchment, a Vatican document rediscovered in 2001. This fragile sheet records the Pope's own investigators absolving the Templars of heresy in private, even as he publicly condemned them. How many other exonerations were buried? Modern historians face a jigsaw puzzle with half the pieces missing. Forensic analysis of ink and parchment reveals curious anomalies. Interrogation records where later handwriting overwrites original statements, margins crammed with added confessions in different scribes' hands. Even the numbers don't add up. Trial transcripts reference testimonies from knights who never appeared in court, their voices silenced mid-sentence. Some researchers speculate these phantom witnesses knew too much perhaps about royal debts or political secrets unfit for the official record. Technology offers new hope in reconstructing the truth. Multispectral imaging has recovered faded ink from reused parchment, revealing Templar financial records beneath later church documents. Chemical analysis of wax seals shows some were melted and resealed, suggesting tampering, but the most revealing clues come from the survivors themselves. In remote chapels from Portugal to Scotland, faded frescoes depict Templars clutching scrolls, not religious texts, but what appear to be accounting ledgers. Were these the real treasures they died protecting? The gaps in the trial records point to something far darker than heresy, a systemic rewriting of history to serve the powerful. When truth becomes inconvenient, parchment burns easily, but ashes can't erase everything. Traces linger in unexpected places. A merchant's ledger noting a sudden debt cancellation, a bishop's diary complaining of royal pressure, even folk songs about hooded men smuggling chests by moonlight. These fragments suggest the Templars' real crime wasn't blasphemy, but knowledge of finances, of secrets, perhaps even of royal bloodlines. And that revelation leads us to the next enigma, whispers of a lost lineage that could have rewritten Europe's dynasties. Amidst the accusations of heresy and idol worship, Another layer of Templar mythology persists: the idea that these warrior monks weren't just bankers and soldiers, but practitioners of forbidden arts. Whispers of alchemical experiments, celestial navigation charts, and rituals invoking ancient powers clung to their legacy long after their dissolution. But how much of this stems from fact, and how much from the fevered imaginations of later occultists hungry for a glamorous pedigree? The Templars' connection to esoteric knowledge begins with their very foundation. When they first excavated beneath Jerusalem's Temple Mount, rumors swirled that they'd uncovered more than just architectural fragments, perhaps arcane texts or artifacts from Solomon's legendary treasury. Their sudden sophistication in finance and architecture fueled speculation. How did a small band of knights master complex interest calculations or build Gothic cathedrals with acoustics that could induce trance-like states? Some point to their contact with Islamic scholars, whose advanced mathematics and astronomy might have been misconstrued as sorcery by medieval Europeans. Even their famed banking system, with its encrypted letters of credit, could easily have been mythologized into secret codes by outsiders. The alchemy claims gained traction when examining Templar sites. At their Paris preceptory, workers excavating in the 18th century reported finding strange glass vessels and residue resembling gold purification experiments. Their churches often bore astrological symbols unusual for Christian architecture: zodiac wheels next to crosses, celestial maps etched into floor tiles. Were these merely decorative or evidence of something deeper? The Order's own rule referenced the science of the stars as essential for navigation, but later occultists like Eliphas Levi reinterpreted this as proof of astrological divination. Posthumously, the Templars became blank slates for every occult revival. Rosicrucians of the 17th century claimed to inherit their secrets, while 19th century mystics like Aleister Crowley wove Templar symbolism into ritual magic. Even modern conspiracy theories conflate their banking network with shadowy financial alchemy. Yet the most plausible explanation is also the simplest. The Templars were pragmatic men whose innovations, so advanced for their time, became indistinguishable from magic to later generations. What's undeniable is how their legend mutated. Each era projected its own obsessions onto the Order: alchemy for the Renaissance, mysticism for the Romantics, conspiracy for the modern age. This transformative power may be their greatest occult feat of all, the ability to shapeshift through history, forever eluding capture by the narrow confines of fact. And that very elusiveness brings us to the next enigma: how their carefully cultivated aura of secrecy became the template for every secret society that followed. The stone walls of Templar structures whisper secrets in a language few can decipher. Across Europe, their churches and commanderies stand as silent monuments to an order obsessed with sacred geometry, alignment, and symbolism. Take Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland, a masterpiece so dense with carvings that scholars still debate whether it's a house of worship or a coded library in stone. Vines twist into Hebrew letters, cornices hide musical notation, and a ceiling swarms with carvings of plants from the Americas decades before Columbus sailed. How could medieval artisans have known such details unless their patrons possessed forbidden knowledge? Rosslyn isn't alone in its mysteries. Templar sites from Portugal to Jerusalem share uncanny architectural quirks. Circular churches modeled after the Holy Sepulchre appear in unlikely places, their acoustics engineered to amplify Gregorian chants to eerie perfection. Underground chambers align with solstice sunbeams, illuminating hidden symbols once a year. Even their fortresses defy convention: octagonal towers that double as astronomical observatories, staircases spiraling counter-clockwise to favor sword-wielding defenders. These weren't just functional choices, they were declarations in stone. The most tantalizing theory suggests Templar architects embedded Gnostic teachings into their designs. At Toma in Portugal, a window frames the exact spot where the star Sirius rises, an Egyptian symbol of wisdom. In France's Sainte Marie du Temple, floor labyrinths mirror Cretan myths of spiritual trials. Were these references accidental or a covert curriculum for initiates? Some researchers argue the Templars fused Christian, Jewish, and Islamic mystical traditions into a visual language, preserving heresies too dangerous to write down. Yet the greatest cipher might lie in what's absent. Templar sites conspicuously lack crucifixion scenes, focusing instead on resurrection symbolism, a possible clue to their rumored belief in a living Christ. Their stonemasons' marks form repeating patterns that match cipher wheels found in later occult manuscripts, hinting at a system lost to time. Even the humble Templar cross, when superimposed on sacred maps, intersects ley lines connecting ancient holy sites across continents. This architectural legacy raises a provocative question. If the Templars encoded knowledge in stone, where else might their influence have traveled? Whispers persist of buildings bearing their signature style as far as Canada's Oak Island and Ethiopia's Lalibela, hints of a reach that stretched far beyond the medieval world's known borders. Could their true mission have been to weave a hidden map across the globe, one that still waits to be read? Among the most audacious theories surrounding the Knights Templar is the claim that their ships didn't just vanish into the Atlantic, they crossed it. Centuries before Columbus, whispers suggest these medieval mariners may have reached the shores of North America, leaving behind enigmatic markers like Rhode Island's Newport Tower. This mysterious stone structure, with its 8 arched columns and unmistakably European design, has baffled historians since colonial times. While mainstream archaeology attributes it to 17th century settlers, its uncanny resemblance to Templar round churches fuels endless speculation. Could this be the ghostly footprint of a forgotten voyage? The evidence, while circumstantial, is tantalizing. Templar fleets were the most advanced of their era, equipped with navigation techniques rumored to be generations ahead of their time. Their alleged star charts, possibly inherited from Arabic astronomers, might have included knowledge of Atlantic currents and wind patterns unknown to later explorers. Even the tower's alignment raises eyebrows. Its windows frame celestial events like the summer solstice, mirroring the astronomical precision found in Templar sites across Europe. Then there's the oak beams embedded in its walls, radiocarbon dated to decades before Columbus's birth, if not Templar whose hand carved these timbers. Beyond Newport, scattered clues hint at a broader mystery. Indigenous oral traditions from Nova Scotia to the Mississippi describe encounters with white-skinned men in robes bearing crosses long before European colonization. The Micmac people's legend of Glooscap, a pale visitor who taught metalworking, echoes oddly with Templar expertise in metallurgy. Even the controversial Kensington runestone, found in Minnesota with its cryptic 14th century Norse Templar hybrid inscription, suggests a transatlantic network far more extensive than textbooks acknowledge. Yet for every compelling artifact, skeptics counter with hard questions. No definitive Templar coins, weapons, or documents have surfaced in the Americas. The Newport Tower's mortar matches 17th century recipes, not medieval ones, and if the Templars did cross the ocean, why is there no record of their return with maps or resources? The lack of a smoking gun leaves the theory suspended between possibility and myth. What's undeniable is how this idea captivates the imagination. It rewrites the narrative of global exploration, casting the Templars not as victims of history, but as its shadow architects. Their alleged journey speaks to something deeper than archaeology, a longing to believe that truth is stranger than sanctioned history. Perhaps the real treasure isn't proof of their arrival, but the questions their legend forces us to ask. How much of the past remains buried, and how many more chapters of their story are still waiting to be unearthed? While the Templars burned, another military order watched from the shadows, one that somehow emerged from their downfall stronger than ever. The Knights Hospitaller, rivals turned reluctant inheritors, walked a dangerous tightrope during Philip IV's purge. On the surface, they shared everything with the doomed Templars' holy warrior status, vast landholdings, even similar white mantles adorned with crosses. Yet when the king's agents came knocking, the Hospitallers' doors remained unbroken. Instead of sharing their brethren's fate, they were handed Templar properties and titles by papal decree. How did they escape the noose, and what role did they truly play in the Templars' destruction? The answer lies in pragmatism, both theirs and the king's. Unlike the Templars, who straddled the line between monks and merchant princes, the Hospitallers leaned harder into their religious identity. While the Templars built banks, the Hospitallers ran hospitals, their charitable works inoculating them against accusations of greed. More crucially, they lacked the Templars' fatal flaw. They weren't France's primary creditors. Philip owed them little, making them useless as financial scapegoats. But the Hospitallers weren't passive beneficiaries. Records show their Grand Master, Fawkes de Villeret, quietly lobbying the Pope to transfer Templar assets long before the arrests began. Some letters even suggest Hospitaller spies fed rumors of Templar heresy to the French court. Yet the truth may be less sinister and more human. The Hospitallers didn't just inherit Templar wealth, they absorbed its surviving members. In England and Aragon, former Templars were allowed to join the Hospitallers by renouncing their old vows. These weren't just symbolic gestures. Eyewitness accounts describe Templar veterans fighting under the Hospitaller cross at Rhodes within a generation, their combat skills too valuable to waste. The absorption wasn't total. Many Templars rejected the offer, vanishing into obscurity, but it created an odd continuity. By sheltering these men, the Hospitallers became unwitting curators of Templar traditions, blending them into their own rituals. This uneasy transition raises deeper questions about medieval power dynamics. The Hospitallers' survival wasn't just luck, it was a calculated dance with the same forces that destroyed the Templars. They learned the hard lesson their rivals ignored. In a world where kings and popes clashed, no order was truly untouchable. Their story doesn't close the book on the Templars' legacy, though. It merely passes it to other, more secretive keepers. Because while the Hospitallers took the lands, others may have taken something far more dangerous: the lost knowledge the Templars died to protect. In 2001, a researcher combing through the Vatican's secret archives stumbled upon a crumbling piece of parchment that would rewrite history, the Chinon document. This fragile sheet, dated August 17th through 20th, 1308, recorded a secret trial where Pope Clement V himself questioned Templar leaders and absolved them of heresy. The revelation was staggering. While publicly condemning the order to appease King Philip, the Pope had privately exonerated them. So why was this explosive truth buried for nearly 700 years? The parchment's contents read like a clandestine thriller. Templar grandmasters, including Jacques de Molay, were brought before papal investigators at Chinon Castle. Under oath without torture, they reaffirmed their loyalty to Christ and the Church, dismissing the lurid confessions extracted in French dungeons as lies born of agony. Clement's verdict was unequivocal. The Templars were guilty of no spiritual crimes, only minor offenses like secretive initiation rites common among medieval orders. Yet within months, the Pope issued public bulls dissolving the order anyway, a contradiction that reeks of political theater. The Chinon parchment wasn't just lost, it was deliberately concealed, tucked behind unrelated files in a vault few could access. Modern scholars debate what this means for the Templars' legacy. Some argue the document proves their innocence, revealing the trial as a sham to justify confiscating their wealth. Others see something more tragic: a pope trapped between morality and survival, signing pardons he hadn't the power to enforce. What's undeniable is the Vatican's awareness of its damning content. For centuries, church historians referenced the lost Chinon verdict, suggesting someone knew exactly where the truth lay. Did fear of royal retaliation keep it hidden? Or was the real heresy not the Templars' rituals, but the proof that kings and popes conspired to destroy loyal servants of God? The parchment's rediscovery sparked a quiet revolution. In 2007, the Vatican published the document officially, tacitly acknowledging the Templars' wrongful persecution. Descendant organizations from Masonic lodges to chivalric orders seized on it as vindication. Even the Catholic Church now cautiously acknowledges the Chinon parchment as evidence of a judicial error, though stopping short of full rehabilitation. But the greater mystery remains. If one explosive document lay buried this long, what else might still be hidden in the archives? This question fuels modern treasure hunters and historians alike, all searching for the next fragment of truth that could finally piece together the Templars' fractured story. The Templars didn't just wield swords, they mastered the far more dangerous art of moving money without moving a single coin. Their financial system was so revolutionary, it made kings both dependent on them and desperate to destroy them. Imagine a medieval merchant traveling from Paris to Jerusalem, terrified of highwaymen stealing his gold. Instead of hauling chests of currency, he'd deposit funds at a Templar preceptory, receiving an encrypted letter of credit. Present that scrap of parchment at any Templar outpost along his route, and the exact amount would be paid out minus a modest fee, of course. This was more than convenience, it was the birth of modern banking, and it made the Templars the silent puppeteers of Europe's economy. Their innovations went beyond mere money transfers. The order issued loans to bankrupt kings, held mortgages for noble estates, and even managed the French crown's payroll. Records show they perfected early forms of checks, interest-bearing accounts, and collateral-based lending concepts that wouldn't become mainstream for centuries. But their true power lay in discretion. Templar vaults safeguarded not just gold, but the darkest financial secrets of the aristocracy. When a duke defaulted on a loan or a bishop siphoned church funds, the Templars knew. In an era when knowledge was currency, their ledgers were worth more than armies. This economic dominance posed an existential threat to feudal hierarchies. Traditional lords derived power from land and brute force, but the Templars proved wealth could be intangible, a number on parchment, shifting across borders with a stroke of a pen. For kings like Philip IV, drowning in Templar-financed debt, the solution wasn't repayment, it was erasure. By framing the order as heretics, Philip didn't just cancel his debts, he dismantled the only system capable of holding monarchs financially accountable. The aftermath reshaped Europe's financial landscape. Without Templar oversight, royal treasuries became black holes of unchecked spending, contributing to the economic chaos of the 14th century. Yet the most tantalizing question isn't how their system worked, it's what became of the wealth they managed. When royal auditors cracked open Templar vaults, they found startling gaps, entire ledgers missing, gold reserves far lower than expected, and cryptic references to off-book transactions. Some historians believe the order had already liquidated assets into untraceable forms, jewels melted down, land titles transferred to shell entities, even rumors of wealth converted into sacred relics whose value couldn't be quantified. If their financial genius could make money appear and vanish on parchment, who's to say it didn't survive their fall? This ghostly fortune, if it exists, would hold more than gold. It would carry the encrypted secrets of a system that once made beggars of kings. And that leads us to the next enigma, the ciphers and codes that may still guard the Templars' last untold truths. The Templars' rumored collection of sacred relics reads like an inventory from an apocalyptic treasure hoard, objects so charged with divine power they blurred the line between faith and legend. At the heart of these claims lies the spear of destiny, the weapon said to have pierced Christ's side at the crucifixion. Medieval chronicles describe Templar knights transporting a lance wrapped in crimson cloth from Jerusalem to Paris, its tip allegedly still stained with holy rust. Yet when royal agents ransacked their preceptories, no such artifact appeared in confiscation records. Was it hidden, or had the Order's enemies fabricated the story to paint them as thieves of divinity itself? Equally compelling are the whispers surrounding fragments of the true cross. Byzantine emperors once boasted of owning the entire crucifixion beam, but after the Fourth Crusade sacked Constantinople in 1204, splinters of the true wood began surfacing in Templar custody. Forensic analysis of verified relic fragments today reveals a curious detail. The total volume of claimed cross pieces across Europe would construct a small forest. Either the Templars guarded a disproportionate share, or they mastered the art of relic replication, turning faith into a lucrative trade. Then there are the darker relics objects that defy easy explanation. Trial transcripts reference a head of wisdom venerated in secret ceremonies, which some scholars argue could have been the mummified skull of John the Baptist. Templar commanderies in the Languedoc region were built atop ancient shrines dedicated to severed head cults. Fueling speculation, they preserved Gnostic traditions of cranial divination. Even more enigmatic are the rumored speaking idols, bronze statues allegedly looted from Moorish palaces that whispered prophecies when oil was poured into their hollow cores. These claims, dismissed as fantastical by mainstream historians, resurface in multiple heresy trials across Europe, suggesting the Templars either cultivated an aura of arcane spectacle or possessed artifacts from civilizations far older than their own. Separating fact from fabrication grows thornier when examining the surviving paper trail. Vatican inventories from 1312 list confiscated Templar relics, including a vessel of silver inscribed with Adam's name and 3 thorns from the crown of thorns. Yet these same documents note peculiar gaps, entries scratched out, quantities altered, whole pages missing. The most damning clue comes from a merchant's ledger found in Marseille, detailing payments to Venetian glassmakers for relic casings of the Jerusalem style. Was this proof of pious preservation or a smoking gun of holy counterfeiting? The fate of these objects after the Order's fall is a mystery wrapped in blood and greed. Some relics undoubtedly entered royal collections. Philip IV, gifted Templar, held fragments of the true cross to favorite bishops. Others may have slipped into the shadowy networks of medieval antiquarians, their provenance laundered through generations of private collectors. A handful of artifacts surfaced centuries later under suspicious circumstances. A bejeweled reliquary matching Templar descriptions sold at a Vienna auction in 1789. A silver cup etched with Solomon's seal discovered in a Cretan cave in 1932. Each discovery raises more questions than answers. Were these genuine survivors of the Purge, or clever forgeries capitalizing on Templar mystique? What lingers isn't just the question of what they possessed, but why these relics mattered. In an age where touching a saint's bone could allegedly cure blindness, controlling sacred objects meant controlling access to the divine. If the Templars truly held artifacts like the spear or the Baptist skull, they wielded not just spiritual authority, but leverage over kings and popes who derived power from such symbols. Their relics weren't merely treasures, they were bargaining chips in a celestial poker game where the stakes were nothing less than the soul of medieval Christendom. This tangled web of devotion and deception forces us to confront an unsettling possibility, that the greatest relic the Templars guarded wasn't any physical object, but the very idea that some truths are too dangerous to be left unburied. Perhaps their real secret was understanding that in the right hands, even a sliver of wood or a rusted nail could become a key, one that might unlock doors better left sealed. Walk into any bookstore today and you'll find shelves groaning under the weight of books claiming to reveal the true legacy of the Knights Templar. From glossy pseudo-histories to secret society manifestos, the modern world is obsessed with resurrecting these medieval warriors, or at least the idea of them. Organizations claiming direct descent from the order range from solemn chivalric brotherhoods to shadowy cabals, each molding the Templar myth to fit their own ambitions. The Order of the Solar Temple, for instance, blended Templar imagery with apocalyptic mysticism before its tragic end in the 1990s. Meanwhile, groups like the Sovereign Military Order of the Temple of Jerusalem, recognized by the United Nations as a charitable NGO, wear the white mantle with pride, dedicating themselves to humanitarian work while insisting on an unbroken lineage. But how much of this is genuine continuity, and how much is clever rebranding? The gulf between historical fact and romantic revival is stark. Medieval Templars were monks first, men who took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, living spare lives in austere commanderies. Modern Templars, by contrast, often seem more drawn to the trappings of power, ornate regalia, titles like Grand Prior, and elaborate initiation rites lifted more from 19th century occultism than any medieval script. Take the popular fascination with Templar secrets. While the original order's rule explicitly forbade esoteric practices, today's revivalists peddle everything from alchemical enlightenment to extraterrestrial contacts under the Templar banner. The dissonance reveals less about the past than about our own hunger for mystery in an increasingly transparent world. Yet the Templar myth endures for reasons deeper than pageantry. At its core, it's a story about the underdog, an elite brought low by corrupt authorities, a brotherhood betrayed despite its loyalty. This narrative resonates in an age skeptical of institutions. Conspiracy theorists see the Templars as proto-whistleblowers, guardians of forbidden knowledge crushed by the establishment. Libertarians frame them as early victims of government overreach, their banking network a cautionary tale about state predation. Even mainstream culture can't resist the tropes, from Dan Brown's blockbusters to video games where Templars lurk behind every historical upheaval. The irony is delicious. An order that strictly served popes and kings has been recast as the ultimate anti-establishment symbol. What makes this revival movement truly fascinating isn't its historical accuracy, it's the way it mirrors the Templars' original appeal. Just as medieval Europeans projected their hopes onto these warrior monks, modern seekers project their anxieties and aspirations onto the legend. The real Templars were products of their time, flawed and human, but the myth transcends history, becoming a vessel for everything we fear or desire about power, faith, and resistance. And that may be the most enduring mystery of all, not what the Templars were, but what we need them to be. Perhaps some truths are destined to stay buried, not because they're too dangerous to uncover, but because the act of searching tells us more about ourselves than any parchment ever could. And that realization leads us to the final enigma, one that asks not where the Templars went, but why, after 7 centuries, we still can't let them go. Behind the Vatican's towering walls, beneath centuries of dust and deliberate silence, may lie the last unturned page of the Templar saga. The Church's secret archives, a labyrinth of locked vaults spanning 53 miles of shelving, reportedly hold documents that could rewrite the Order's history if anyone could read them. Scholars from Oxford to the Sorbonne have spent decades petitioning for access to specific Templar-related parchments, only to be met with polite but firm rejections. Even the Vatican's own archivists admit that less than 1% of the collection has ever been catalogued, let alone studied. What could be so sensitive that it remains under lock and key 700 years later? The rumors aren't baseless speculation. In 1843, Pope Leo Roman XIII accidentally fueled the fire by granting limited access to historian Etienne Balluz, who later described seeing chests of Templar trial records marked with 13th century French royal seals. Among them, allegedly, were original interrogation transcripts bearing the personal annotations of Philip IV's ministers' notes that might reveal which confessions were coerced and which were genuine. Then there's the infamous Dossier B, referenced in a 1965 inventory as containing privileged correspondence between Clement V and his confessor regarding the Templar matter. The Vatican's sole comment, a terse statement that such materials are under review for potential future scholarly examination. Those who have glimpsed fragments tell tantalizing stories. Father Xavier de Molay, a 19th century archivist, wrote privately of stumbling upon a ledger listing Templar assets transferred to the Hospitallers, with entire pages torn out. More recently, digital scans of a papal ledger from 1311 revealed an erased entry mentioning a final instruction for the Templar brothers. Infrared imaging showed the original words, to be delivered to Avignon under night guard. Why the secrecy around a shipping order unless it involved something extraordinary? The theories about what these suppressed documents might reveal range from the plausible to the earth-shaking. Some historians believe they'd expose the full extent of Philip's financial motives, perhaps even showing the king doctoring evidence. Others speculate they contain the Templars' own account of their mysterious rituals, free from torture-distorted confessions. Then there's the more radical notion that the archives hold proof the order discovered something in Jerusalem that threatened the foundations of Christian doctrine, alternate gospels, evidence of a surviving bloodline of Christ, or even records of a pre-Christian tradition the Church couldn't assimilate. What makes the Vatican's silence so deafening isn't just the withholding of truth, it's the pattern. Every few decades, a carefully curated snippet emerges as if testing the waters. In 1912, a memo surfaced confirming that Clement V privately absolved Templars in England and Spain. In 2007, the Chinon parchment was rediscovered and published. These controlled disclosures suggest the Church isn't just sitting on history, it's managing a narrative, releasing only what no longer threatens the orthodoxy. This dance between concealment and revelation forces us to confront a humbling reality. History isn't the past itself, but the fragments that survive the filters of power. The Templar's story, like so many others, remains half-buried not by time's erosion but by deliberate hands. Perhaps the final lesson of their downfall isn't about what we've learned, but what we've been conditioned not to ask. From the shadowed cloisters of history to the glare of Hollywood spotlights, the Templars have undergone a transformation no medieval chronicler could have imagined. Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code didn't just sell millions of copies, it rebranded these warrior monks as keepers of explosive religious secrets, their white mantles swapped for the trench coats of modern conspiracy thrillers. The novel's premise that the Templars guarded the bloodline of Christ tapped into a cultural vein pulsing with distrust of institutions and hunger for hidden truths. Yet for all its fictional flair, Brown's tale borrowed from real debates among historians about the Order's potential discoveries beneath Jerusalem's Temple Mount. The irony is delicious. A story dismissing the Church's narrative became its own kind of gospel, shaping public perception more than any dusty parchment ever could. Video games have taken the Templar myth in darker, more ambiguous directions. Ubisoft's Assassin's Creed franchise reimagines them as a shadowy cabal manipulating world events across centuries, a far cry from their historical role as bankers and bodyguards. What's fascinating isn't the artistic license, but how these digital Templars reflect contemporary anxieties about corporate power and surveillance. Their sleek, modern iterations, corrupt CEOs and political puppeteers echo medieval fears of their financial influence, proving some legends adapt to every era. Even the game's meta-narrative mirrors actual Templar history. Just as the Order was accused of infiltrating governments, the franchise reveals their digital counterparts controlling the gaming industry itself. Life imitates art, imitating a 700-year-old rumor. Cinema has oscillated between caricature and reverence. Classic films like Ivanhoe cast Templars as scowling villains, their crosses twisted into symbols of tyranny. Yet recent portrayals from the tortured knights of the Last Templar to the mystical archaeologists of National Treasure paint them as tragic heroes wronged by history. This shift mirrors broader cultural trends, where once they were convenient bogeymen, now they're anti-establishment icons. The most telling detail lies in what these adaptations consistently exaggerate their secrecy. While historical Templars kept mundane financial records in triplicate, pop culture inflates their covert ops into labyrinthine conspiracies. Our modern obsession with leaks and whistleblowers has retrofitted them into medieval Edward Snowdens. Why does this medieval order resonate so powerfully in the age of social media and space travel? The answer lies in the gaps, the blank spaces in their story that invite projection. They were bankers who acted like monks, warriors who built libraries, servants of the church who answered to no bishop. This ambiguity makes them perfect vessels for our own unresolved tensions about faith, power, and identity. Their sudden fall mirrors modern cancel culture. Their financial genius prefigures cryptocurrency. Even their multicultural connections in the Holy Land read like an allegory for globalization. The Templars aren't just history, they're a mirror reflecting whatever truths or fears we bring to them. This cultural afterlife raises a provocative question. Does pop culture obscure their reality or preserve it in ways textbooks cannot? When a teenager battling digital Templars in Assassin's Creed pauses to read a database entry about Philip IV's debts, that's history transmitted through unlikely channels. The distortions themselves are revealing what we choose to amplify says as much about us as about them. Perhaps their greatest legacy isn't in vaults or vault games, but in proving that some stories refuse to stay buried, even when the truth is stranger than the fiction. And that brings us finally to the last mystery, the one question that ties all others together. Why, after 7 centuries, does the shadow of the Templars still stretch so long across our collective imagination? The question of what truly became of the Knights Templar after their suppression isn't just a historical puzzle, it's a mirror reflecting how we grapple with incomplete truths. 3 broad narratives have emerged over 7 centuries, each with compelling arguments and tantalizing gaps. The simplest is annihilation, the idea that Philip IV's purge was as thorough as intended. Proponents point to the grim statistics: hundreds of knights burned or imprisoned, their properties redistributed, their name outlawed. Jacques de Molay's death pyre, in this view, was the final period on their story. Yet even this tidy ending phrase at the edges, surviving trial records show at least 200 Templars unaccounted for in France alone after the arrests, while in regions like Germany and Cyprus, many knights simply blended into local monastic orders with barely a whisper of protest from authorities. A more intriguing possibility is survival not as a continuous secret society, but as scattered embers reigniting in unexpected places. Portugal's Order of Christ provides the clearest example. King Denis simply rebranded the Templars in 1319, transferring their assets and personnel wholesale under a new name. These Portuguese Templars by another name later financed Vasco da Gama's voyages, their distinctive cross sails becoming the emblem of the age of exploration. Scotland's Rosslyn Chapel, with its uncanny Templar symbolism built a century after the Order's demise, hints at another pocket of continuity. Then there are the persistent rumors of fugitive knights embedding themselves within guilds of stonemasons, perhaps explaining why Freemasonry later adopted so many Templar motifs. These fragments suggest not an organized conspiracy, but a diaspora of knowledge and tradition adapting to survive. The most radical theory is transformation, that the Templars didn't just endure physically, but evolved spiritually into something new. Occult traditions from the Renaissance onward claimed the order had always been a front for esoteric wisdom, using their military and banking power as cover. This idea gained traction in the 18th century when fringe groups like the Bavarian Illuminati began appropriating Templar imagery for their own secret societies. While historians dismiss most such claims as fantasy, there's an undeniable pattern. Wherever institutional power falters, the Templar myth resurfaces as a symbol of resistance. Revolutionaries during the French Reign of Terror invoked de Molay's name as they toppled monarchies, while modern conspiracy theorists cast the Templars as proto-whistleblowers against corrupt systems. What makes their fate so endlessly debatable is the human drama at its core. These weren't faceless pawns of history, but men who'd pledged their lives to an ideal, only to watch that ideal betrayed by the very institutions they served. The anguish in recounted confessions, the defiance in de Molay's final words, the silent resilience of those who vanished. These emotional truths transcend the dry facts of property seizures and papal bulls. Perhaps their ultimate legacy isn't in vaults or bloodlines, but in demonstrating how quickly the powerful will turn on their servants when convenience demands it. The Templar story endures precisely because it refuses neat conclusions. Like smoke from their Grand Master's pyre, it twists into new shapes with each generation's breath, sometimes a warning, sometimes an inspiration, but always a reminder that history belongs to those who keep asking questions. And so we return again and again to those last nights standing in the flames, not just to uncover their secrets, but to understand what their defiance means for our own battles between truth and power. From the ashes of Friday the 13th arrests to the whispers of lost fleets carrying treasure into legend, the 25 mysteries surrounding the Knights Templar form a tapestry where history and myth become indistinguishable. Each unanswered question pulls us deeper, whether it's the eerie precision of Philip IV's coordinated raids, the Vatican's sudden reversal on the Templars' guilt, or the vanished ships of La Rochelle that seem to sail straight into folklore. The charges of Baphomet worship, the missing archives, the rumored survival in Scotland and Portugal. These aren't just gaps in the record. They're deliberate echoes, reverberations of a story someone very powerful tried to erase. What makes their downfall so uniquely haunting isn't just the scale of their destruction, but the shadows it cast. Here was an order that built its reputation on transparency, bankers whose word was bond, warriors whose vows were unbreakable yet died under accusations of unimaginable secrecy. Their paradoxes mirror our own modern tensions, faith versus power, loyalty versus survival, the stories written by victors versus the truths whispered by the lost. That's why Templar legends flourish in every era. They're not just medieval relics, they're mirrors for whatever we fear or crave, be it corporate overreach, institutional corruption, or the tantalizing idea that world-changing truths still lie buried. For those hungry to chase these echoes, the trail hasn't gone cold. Visit Toma in Portugal, where the Order of Christ's Cross still adorns caravel sails frozen in stone. Walk the octagonal corridors of Temple Church in London, where the effigies of knights lie eternally vigilant beneath your feet. Or trace the cryptic carvings of Rosslyn Chapel, where stone vines twist into Hebrew and plants from across the oceans bloom centuries too early. Even the Vatican's secret archives, with their 53 miles of uncatalogued documents, stand as an open invitation, a challenge to keep digging. And so we return to Jacques de Molay, chained to his pyre on that March night in 1314. His curse wasn't just a final act of defiance, it was a promise, not of supernatural vengeance, but of something far more enduring, the certainty that some stories refuse to be silenced. Whether you see the Templars as martyrs, heretics, or something in between, their legacy is a reminder that history's greatest mysteries aren't puzzles to be solved, but conversations without end. The moment we stop asking questions is the moment the fire truly